And we're live.
Hey guys, welcome back to a new episode of Pacecast, episode number 4 already. So let me just quickly say hi. I'm Tijs. I'm from Enjoy RC, and then through the magic of the internet, on the other side of the North Sea, we have James.
Yes, we
do. From Pace and RC Boss.
Hello, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. So as always, we're on the live stream. So if you want to join in, feel free to send us a chat in the YouTube chat box or any other messages. But YouTube is definitely the best. And we'll try and get to your questions and comments throughout the stream. And if we don't, then we'll save them for next week for the next episode. So yeah, again, we have a busy program today. Last week we talked a little bit about a bunch of news. But mostly about different kinds of events and tracks and stuff that are all around the world. We had Germany, Sweden, South Africa, the new UK champs. So yeah, if you have any information, any pictures, any news to share about an event that went on in your local area, then feel free to send us some updates so we can share them on the stream.
Yeah, for
as
sure.
we did last week.
And speaking of updates, we've had an update from Bauka last minute. He's just got his new pace shirt, which is kind of cool. So thanks for sending the picture, man. So
yeah, and he's not the only one.
No,
I also got my pace shirt in my pace cast shirt actually. So,
that's funny because I also got a new one. So we're we're all t-shirt buddies. But yeah, no.
So if you...
I was going to say, as before, we've got a link down below in the description. So if you want to grab yourself a t-shirt or some stickers or anything like that, we've got some nice hoodies as well. Mine's on the way. Yeah, you can grab them there. So thanks again for the support, guys.
Yeah, so for this week, we have for this episode, we have a couple things we want to talk about. Bit of news, new products and stuff that came out as we always do. That's what we usually kick off the stream with. And then our big topic for today is weight. Lightweight chassis, heavy chassis. Comparing some parts and stuff, so we'll get into that later.
Have a nice little discussion about it, I guess, because I think there's pros and cons for everything to do with weight, to be honest.
Yeah, so also send your input on that. If you feel free to send them in, so we can try and answer them for you.
For sure. Well, I guess we should start off with the product news.
Yes, I mean 2 weeks ago we talked about high traction wheels.
Yep.
And look who's new to the game. It's MST.
Yes, and for me, they've picked the best design they could out of their collection, so I'm happy about that, for sure.
Yeah, same for me. Yeah,
yeah.
So these are the TSP model wheels, and yeah, just like the other ones, they're made of a softer plastic.
Yes.
So you can actually have a bit more traction, as we discussed 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, they're coming in 2 offsets, 5s and 7s. I'm assuming it's packs of 4. But I haven't actually checked, to be perfectly honest. Mostly MST wheels are always in packs of 4. So, yeah, they should be. And I'm excited to try them, to be honest, because you can see in the next picture, they're showing just how soft they are. Now, I personally, I actually hate that kind of picture because it's really misleading. It shows you that somebody can squeeze a wheel, but you can squeeze most wheels like that if you really try. It doesn't show you how much force is required or anything like that, but it's just good to see that they're at least on the same page as the other manufacturers. The only thing I can't really see from that picture is how curved the inner edge is on the wheel, because it looks like it's maybe got an angle on in that photo. But I tend to like wheels that have big angles on the inner edge so that you can clear ball ends and upper arms and everything like that a lot easier. But it'd be really good to see what they do.
Usually MST wheels are pretty thin anyway, so
yeah.
If they kept the exact same mold, I think we should be fine.
And I would assume they have kept the mold, which is why they've released an old wheel design. It's the easy way to do it.
You can still see the little holes for the wheel nuts and stuff in there too, which the old ones used to have.
Yeah, so. And which they don't really need them anymore, so if they were doing a new mold, they'd have certainly got rid of that, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, they've got 2 part numbers available. It's only white again. White seems to be the go-to for most people. I think, to be perfectly honest, I think the reason a lot of manufacturers are starting to do mainly white wheels is because so many people paint their wheels now, and it's the easy color to paint, and it saves them having to have lots of stock and dealers to have lots of stock. So yeah.
Yeah. Plus, also for competitions and most events, bright colored wheels are required. So
yeah,
this will actually fit that.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm excited to try them. I really like them. I haven't run these wheels for a number of years, but yeah, I'll definitely be trying them out at some point. And I'll definitely compare them to the overdose version.
Especially compared to normal MST wheels, these are probably going to be very soft because the normal ones are very stiff usually. So
yeah, and as going back to what we've mentioned before, there's pros and cons of running them, and some people like to run them on the back and on the front, and it's different for different surfaces and different settings, and so it'd be good. It's good that it's the same design, like the overdose Kiwamis were, where you can choose to run high traction mixed with something else and have it look and match, you know.
Yeah, and 2 different offsets, which I'm happy about because these are exactly the sizes that I always use.
Yes,
So
well, again, it's the most common sizes. I always used to run 5s. I've switched to running 7s, but we got a nice quick question there from Richie come in. He says he's new to the competition scene. Why do you need to run bright wheels? It's so as a judge, it's a bit of a sort of unnecessary thing, I personally think. But a lot of competitions have rules to say you've got to use bright wheels so that competitions and judges can see what your wheels are doing better. To me, you can still see, but I think it's a rule that I think D110 the world's brought in last year or the year before, I forget, a couple of years ago.
I think longer than that actually. It's been around for a while. Yeah.
And it just makes it easier for judging in theory, but yeah, it depends on judges whether they feel it's necessary or not. Generally, I tend to run black wheels all of the time when I'm running in competitions, and it's generally as simple as I don't really run black wheels ever, and then by the time I do another competition, it's been long enough I fancy running them again. So it's as simple as that. It's not to hide anything or do anything dodgy, but yeah, the looking at those TSPs, I'm desperate to run them because one of my favourite things used to be with the when we used to run them with the 4-wheel drive days when the MST first brought out the TSPs. The spokes, you can't really see it in that picture, but the spokes actually protrude from the front of the wheel, so you can actually bang spokes with somebody, which makes a huge bang. Generally breaks a wheel or scuffs them up big time anyway, but it's funny because it means you were super close and yeah, just a bit aggressive.
Yeah, and they just look awesome too. I mean, it's the Race 57 Extreme style reel. I also have a set. I never actually ran them because MST wheels. I went to the changeable offset ones, but these, they're definitely going to find their way underneath my car at some point.
Are you going to paint them?
I'm not sure because they're flexible. I'm not sure how well paint is going to stick.
I think it's worth trying. Maybe you're the guy to test it.
Maybe the Tamiya paint, the PS might actually stick pretty well.
Yeah, for sure.
Made to stay flexible. So
yeah.
Or actually, I can put them in a bath with some pigment. See if I can dye them.
Yeah, that should be relatively easy, I think.
If they stay nice and round, because that might be an issue.
Yeah, I think for me, I'll probably paint them as just to try using PS paints and then using PS 55, the flat clear,
as a primer. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and as just as a clear coat, essentially to stop them scratching off and to give it a tough outer finish. Which I'm sure whatever you do to paint these, the second you bang spokes with someone, paint's coming off. But it is what it is.
At least on the edges. Yeah.
Hello to everyone joining chat.
Yeah, we had some more new products coming out this week.
Yes, we did.
Instead of Reve D springs.
Yes.
They keep bringing out new products pretty much every week.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the major ones. In the last couple of weeks.
It's one of the more universal ones. You don't need to be running something that everything's going to bolt straight onto. This will work on pretty much every drift chassis. And this is a super interesting product because I don't know if many of you guys know, but I'm a huge spring collector. I basically buy every set I can get my hands on to try them out, and I'll definitely be buying a set of these. But the description they've put up is really confusing, like to the point where we don't actually know what you're getting, because in the next picture I'll pop up, you've got a nice box. It's a single box, and you've also then got this 5 pairs of springs, which makes sense. Yeah. You get five pairs, they're all different weights. But they specifically mention in their description that it's a set of 5 types of 2-wheel drive front and HT rear springs. So and you can see in one of the pictures, in this picture, one of the sets is the one on the left is a different color. So is that, or it appears to be a different color. So does that mean that's the rears and the rest are fronts, or does that mean, is it just coincidental that the photo looks like it's got a different color on? Because it's weird for them to declare that they're fronts and rears, and to have them all the same length, or apparently the same length, and similar coil winding and all of that sort of thing. I think maybe the one on the left is a bit shorter, but
yeah, the coil winding is slightly different too, because if you look at the one on the left, you see that the bottom coils are very packed together.
Yeah.
It's the only one that has that, as far as I can see.
Yeah, so it appears as if they've got a pair that are for the rear, and then the rest are to change on the front. But I mean, they announced this, I think it was yesterday, and the description and just doesn't really answer that question for me. To be perfectly honest, I should have contacted them to ask them before, but I didn't notice until I was preparing for this earlier today. So it'll be interesting to see what they're like. I'm sure they'll be good. The only thing I'm not sure on is how they'll work on a heavy car, because the guys at Reve D at the moment are on a super lightweight thing, on the topic we'll talk about later. But Hayate, for example, is running, when I saw him competing in November, he was running 74% rear weight bias. So the front end of his, and I think the overall weight of the chassis was around 1,300 grams. So the front of his car is incredibly light. So if you've got a heavy front end, are these springs going to work? Are they going to be, able to support the front of the chassis? Or is it, I'm sure they'll be fine, but it's the only question I've got about them really, other than is one set designed for the rear. Yeah.
So the thing that got me from the description is that they also mentioned that the springs are reversible.
Yes.
So to me, I mean, I don't really understand how that works, because normally the spring, no matter which way around you put it, they will have the same spring rate.
Right? Yes, but because of the coil windings at one end, they will behave slightly differently depending on whether that is at the top or the bottom of the damper. For the same reason that some people will switch dampers and run them upside down, because you've got the essentially the unsprung weight of the bottom of the damper and the shock collar, the spring retainer, will move a little bit easier if the spring is softer at the bottom, so it'll absorb initial bumps fractionally better. Obviously, it depends on how the winding is different. If it's half the spring rate of the rest of the spring, then that's going to be very different. But it's unlikely because it's the same coil with the same treatment and everything like that on there. So the chances are it will just be a very minor difference. That, to be perfectly honest, unless you're on a super hard surface, you won't notice a difference, I'm sure. But and I don't think I've got it to hand, but actually one of the things I've been testing since November when I was in Japan was RC96 actually do essentially a rubber O-ring to put on top of your spring, and it essentially acts like a helper spring on a rail car to absorb the very minute little bumps, and they do different stiffnesses and different sizes, and I've tested 3 different versions and I found a set that actually worked, which, to be perfectly honest, I bought them because they were super cheap. They were like, I don't know, less than €2 for a pack of 4. I bought all of them to try out, and they were, I found one that worked. The rest didn't really feel much, but one definitely worked on the hard surfaces. But
yeah. So I'm curious to see how they will go, and I'm sure we're gonna find out some more information about them.
Yeah, for sure.
Also the length, I'm curious about.
Yeah, I was surprised that they didn't mention that in the set, or in their description.
Do you know if the Yokomo big bore dampers run at different size springs than other dampers?
No, I've always used the same ones.
Yeah? Okay, because on touring cars and buggies, it's always the bigger.
I'm also pretty sure that the Reve D guys are running the Axon 16-hole piston crazy fast jobbies.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, I don't know. We'll find out more for sure, and I'm going to, as soon as these are available to order, I'll get some on order, I think, to test. I can't imagine, they also didn't mention price. I can't imagine they're going to be that expensive, because it's a simple spring set. They're not titanium, they're nothing too fancy. But we'll see once they've made more announcements, for sure.
Yeah, so what's the last question I had for this one is what surface they're for? Because it says multiple different ones, but usually the stuff we used to see from Yokomo, at least, was always designed for a specific driving style, and sort of lean towards a more specific surface?
I would bet a rather large amount of money that it's going to be for P-tile and polished concrete, well, painted concrete more specifically. The Reve D guys are mostly practicing. They go everywhere, but their sort of new home circuit essentially is RC Vega, which is a grippy P-tile. It is very grippy compared to other P-tile, particularly now, but I would imagine that's going to be what they've sort of been testing these on. They do have their own track. They have a carpet track they had a carpet track, I should say, in preparation for the RCDC event. So it's possible they've been trying them on that as well. It's all a bit unknown. I don't have any facts on them, to be perfectly blunt, but my gut feeling is these are going to be P-tile and painted concrete because that's what's most popular in Japan.
All right. And while we're on the topic of springs, the quick question came in from Stuart on the chat. And he was wondering if there's any specific springs for rear motor chassis, since usually they have a bit more rear weight bias.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of specific spring sets, no. But generally people will just run a stiffer spring on the rear and a lighter spring on the front because the weight is further back. In terms of being able to name springs are really hard to recommend for people generally. When we used to have Soul RC, you could recommend springs because everyone was running on the same tyre on the same track with similar chassis. We were all mostly running four-wheel drive, and when we were running rear-wheel drive, it was, people were running an FXX or they're running a YD2, so you had a rough idea of where the weight bias was going to be. But now with everyone running such massive differences and on totally different surfaces with totally different tyres, if I go to Cookies, I run a very different spring than if I go to Drift Essex. One is polished concrete, one is carpet. So it's very difficult to make a recommendation. And the same as if you go to polished concrete to painted concrete, you might need a different spring, and you might need a different range of springs entirely, depending on what you're trying to do as well. If you're trying to get loads of movement in the chassis, then you're going to want a really well sprung chassis. Whereas if you're trying to keep it more stable and not move around too much, then actually you might want something quite different. So in the long roundabout way, there's not really a specific set, but as a general rule, you'll want to go a bit stiffer on the rear and a bit lighter on the front, probably, unless you really want the front to bounce around a lot.
Yeah, so that will probably count the same for people with rear-mounted ESCs and just generally with a lot of rear weight bias. And it doesn't really matter if it's the motor or anything else that's heavy on the rear.
And the opposite, yeah, exactly, it's just trial and error. So the opposite is kind of true as well when you've got front motor chassis, like an FRD or an FXX. A slight difference would be if you're trying to run a different style, like Kashigari style with all the body roll and movement. Also, if you're running an FRD version 5 with the high motor, then you're going to need to control that differently than if it's a low motor. So, yeah, like I say, I just buy all of the springs I can get my hands on because sometimes you find magic, and sometimes you buy springs that you don't expect to be any good. I mean, I remember quite a few years ago now, but I remember buying a pair of HPI springs just because they were there and I hadn't seen them in a shop before. Picked them up and I ended up running them for about 6 months because they were better than anything else I could get my hands on for the track I was running on most of the time. But every time I go to Japan now, there's a new set of springs that are the must-have springs that everybody must run, and they're out of stock everywhere and you really struggle to find them. But then you go back 6 months later and nobody's running that spring anymore because everyone's changing the way they're driving, or everyone's gone to rear motors, so it's all gone crazy. But in 2018, the springs everybody was running with the TN Racing 30 and 32 millimeter springs, and then I went back last year and everybody's now running the R31 House 9 coil and 5 coil springs from the new GRK4. So yeah, it's crazy how quickly spring trends change, I think. So just buy everything you can get your hands on and that you can realistically afford, and you won't use a bunch for a long time, but then one day you'll pull them out and they'll be just what you need.
Yeah, just give a bunch of them a try. It doesn't hurt to have a extra, I guess.
Yeah, and we got another question come in about dual rate springs. What do we think of them? Dual rate springs, in the right situation, they're kind of cool, but they're a really old sort of style of, or it's a really old trend. I think that's about 2014. I think when RC96 brought out the two short springs with the collar. They're kind of cool, and it's definitely a handy set to have now because you're not going to find anything like that these days. I'm not a massive fan of them because the ranges were too extreme. I think when you changed the upper spring to a different one, it changed too much for my liking. So it's quite hard to find a matched pair, essentially.
Yeah, it's the same with the progressive springs as well. I really
Yeah.
just remember them from the CS days. Back then, I didn't really like them, so
There was a
never really
period of
got back to
time
them.
I really liked the MST. What do they call them? Is it DK springs or something like that? They're progressive springs, and they were really good for a year. Everybody ran them, and they were really good. But then when I see people running them these days, most people have just added preload to compress the softer part of the spring anyway. So they're essentially just running a stiffer linear spring that's shorter. So yeah, the dual rate thing, it works sometimes. Sometimes it's a bit of a faff, and sometimes it's just not right. But when it works, it works. Same as every spring. Like I say, you might find some magic somewhere, but you'll probably find out of a set of 10 springs, you'll use one pair if they're dual rate, and maybe only at one track where they just happen to be spot on. They're a bit harder to, they're a bit less predictable, so they're harder to judge whether they're going to work somewhere, I think. Okay.
All right.
So
And yeah, what else happened this week?
well,
We had a
we had a new opening. We had the new Iroha circuit opened, which is super, super exciting for me because the old Iroha circuit was awesome, and the sort of family of guys that were there were among the best guys to go and drift with. It's essentially a wrap-up circuit. Everyone there runs wrap-up, but they're all really happy guys, really happy to share, really happy to like teach, and they're just really fun guys. And so Iroha closed last year, I think, in early first half of the year for sure. I think it's maybe April or May. And I was gutted because I didn't get to go before it closed. And when I saw the guys last year, I was asking about whether they're going to open a new track, and they just said they're going to try. They're desperate to get somewhere because they were travelling around to the local tracks. You know, I saw a couple of the guys at Cascade, which is not so far, but it's not their home track. It's not a wrap-up track, and that's what they wanted to get back to, I think. So they've opened Iroha version 2 essentially, and they had a.
And if you're not familiar with Iroha, I would say just have a quick look on YouTube if you're done with this podcast, because YouTube's full of videos of Iroha. They're famous for their videos with long trains, very consistent.
Yeah, and for a long time they all ran their fail crew bodies as well, which a lot of people replicated. But
and I think was it also with the Corollas, or is that Winds? Because usually Iroha and Winds, they both have a lot of similar body shells.
Right? But the cool thing as well this weekend is they had a sort of pre-opening and invited a load of their guys, which is what this first picture was both from. So there you've got Yodo from Overdoses there. You've got Inagaki, who's a RCC guy, and then you've got all the regular guys and a few of their sort of special invited guests. And it looks like the surface is the same as the old Iroha, which was an epoxy, which they had sort of found the magic sauce to make it work really well, and they polished the crap out of it. So every time I went there, it's slightly different grip levels, and normally it was pretty good. And then one time, I think it was 2017, I went with the guys from FLD and Zero Feel, and I was saying to the guys from FLD's first time it was, this, it's not so hard to find grip. It's pretty grippy there. And then we put the cars down, and I could barely move. It was the slipperiest track I've ever been to because they'd waxed the crap out of it, and it was literally just like glass. It was amazing.
If you look at the pictures, the floor looks super shiny.
Yeah,
so I think they might have done something similar this time as well.
I would imagine they have, and the layout looks really fun. Actually, it looks much bigger in terms of overall space. I actually don't have pictures of the outside of the building because I couldn't find any nice clean ones while I was looking, but it looks like a really nice building, really big space, big pits, and lots of parking at the front. And yeah, the surface looks amazing. It looks like they've really thought about the layout as well, because it's a lot more, gives them a bit more room to be aggressive in more places on the track. It's essentially, I think, probably 1.5 times track length from what I can work out as the old one, in terms of time or distance to do a lap. But it looks amazing. I can't wait to get back there, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, so for me, I noticed straight away that they have quite a few straight bits on the track. It isn't all wavy and curvy.
Yeah.
Which a bunch of straights, small straights with
this the
almost
best
90-degree corners here and there.
for me. It's the best kind of track when it's got straights. You need straights to build speed, especially on low grip surfaces. Carpet, you need it too for style, but for me, part of the test of skill on surfaces like this is building speed and then doing a big snap into a drift for a corner or wall run or whatever it is. But it's a style that I particularly love. So yeah, can't wait. I've already reserved my table, and I'll be there. I think, to be perfectly honest, I might try and squeeze 2 days in there on my next trip because I expect it's going to be amazing.
Also, the way they decorated the track, because it's super clean. It has all the bright green and the bright red from the curbs and the grass, but it's super clean. So both you will get nice pictures because there's at least something going on in the background, but you can see everything. It looks very clean, and I think it will be easy on the eyes when you're driving there for quite a while.
Yeah, and what I like is there's not much detail on the track, but then they've got one section that's like a small pit area, which I think they'll probably add more and more detail to, which is kind of what they had at the old track. They used to have a straight that you come down that had a kink in, and before the kink they had essentially pit garages set up, and it looked cool to pose your car with and all that kind of thing. But now, yeah, they just keep it clean. This is what I like. I like tracks that just have minimal detail because you want to focus on the driving, and also it maximizes the amount of space you can drift. If you imagine each of those barriers was 6 inches wide, so they could have some, nice grass features and body shells in between and things like that, then you lose a lot of space pretty quickly when you've got so many sort of lanes going across the space available. So yeah, it maximizes it. Means you can run the best lines and just you're not as restricted.
Yeah, funny thing also, because unfortunately you don't have the pictures of the outside, but it actually looks like it was a diner or something before.
Yeah, for sure.
Really
especially when you look at the floor that's in the pits, which again, sorry, I don't have a photo of.
Yeah.
But it's like a sort of mosaic, tile-y kind of. I don't know the correct way. I'm not a flooring expert, but it looks like a diner kind of flooring for sure.
Yeah, and also speaking about the pits, they have some TVs hanging there on the ceiling.
Yes.
So actually, when you're in the pits, you can still watch what's going on.
I was going to say, the cool thing with the TVs is they're basically live streams to various spots on the track, including where the drivers stand, so you can point and laugh at people that have their serious concentrating face on.
Yeah, at least you're still connected. Usually either you are in the pits or you are on the track, and not both. And now it's a bit connected, which I find pretty interesting.
Yeah, I just can't wait. I'm almost certain this will be one of my favourite tracks when I go back. The old one was always up there as one of the best tracks, and then this one looks like a good improvement from the old one for sure.
Yeah, I hope I can also make it there at some point. This
we'll
was
make it
well
happen.
before. Yeah, let's see. I mean, this is one of those bucket list ones, especially if you see all the videos. Every time you see it, you're like, "Ooh, I want to be part of that train they're running."
For sure. And the funny thing for me is every time anyone goes there, they come away wanting to buy a wrap-up chassis, because that's where you drive the good ones. It's where the development takes place at these tracks, and so you come away and you're like, I came away from this and I went and bought a Travis, and then you get home and you're like, yeah, maybe not. Maybe I can't be bothered. It's not as interesting when you're at home, but when you're there, it's like, this is the greatest. This chassis is so good.
Maybe that's the one to bring to Japan then. Make sure you pack it in your suitcase.
Yeah, for sure.
At least you can drive it where it belongs.
Yeah, get the help getting it set up, and I mean, when you're there, you won't end up buying the wrong parts like I did. But yeah, I can't wait. Just can't wait.
Yeah, more things happening this weekend. We had an event really close to me actually, in Belgium, of the guys from Side Sliders.
Yes.
So as mentioned in the beginning of this episode, if there's any events on, let us know so we can actually show your pictures. So what happened this weekend was they have, and this is something they always do, like the guys from Side Sliders, they have a temporary track they put up once a month. So it's in a community center basically. They have the layout already taped down on the carpet, so whenever they roll it out, they're pretty much ready to go. Put the curbs down and some railings, and they can drift. But what they do now is every month they have a theme for their event, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
This weekend it was the AE86 and GT86 Fest, so just Corollas or GT86 body shells. I think previously they had an old school day where it was just old timers and 80s boxes driving around, a Skyline day, things like that. And they always do a body competition as well, which is cool, with some custom made prizes, some trophies they always make in the theme of the event. I think the best ones I've seen so far are usually for Halloween, where they're covered in spider
Yeah.
webs and things
Yeah.
like that, which is really
And I'd
funny.
imagine they do Christmas as well.
Christmas for sure, yes. So bodies full of fake snow and Christmas trees on the roof, and it's good fun to go there. I should go more often because really for me it's like half an hour or a bit more away. It's just over the border here, so yeah, it's one to watch. And I think they also send in a video and some pictures, right?
Yeah.
Of what was going on.
Yeah, I'm
I
just
think,
just cycling through the pictures now, but you do love a breed featured or liveried Corolla. It's one of the cool ones, isn't it? But
yeah,
it's
exactly. Yeah,
I think
some
it's
guys
super
really
cool
put
when
the effort in.
I was going to say it's really cool because it means people can put the effort in, and it gives you an excuse to try a different body sometimes.
Yeah, or get an old one off the shelf. So I
Yeah,
think the GT86 here is actually an old one that
yeah,
the guys just pulled off the shelf from an old team livery. And I usually do the same, especially with the GT80 or the AE86s.
yeah,
I have a Corolla I built in 2010, and I still use it. It's
yeah,
completely battered and scratched up and broken, but it's fun to drive it at least once a year or so.
yeah. It's cool,
Yeah,
man. For me, I'm a big fan of Corollas, so I love seeing these.
yeah, and yeah, like I said, they always do a body shell competition. So that really, this was actually the winner,
Yeah.
the red one. If I got it correctly, this one's from Twan, one of the Dutch guys. And yeah, I mean, they really put in the effort because now you're sort of challenged not to run your standard team livery, your
Yeah,
standard team body, and it's something different every time. Someone else shines usually when it's
yeah, and it's
their
good.
favorite theme.
It's good as well because it means that you're giving people a reason to come to the track, other than the usual weekend, without it being a competition. So it means that people aren't, it's a bit more laid back, less stress. But yeah, as you say, they sent us the videos as well, which we should be able to show here. But it just looks like a fun event, and you can see it's just Corollas and GT86s. So it's
yeah. People
it's always
usually
good.
stick around for pretty long as well because I think the event usually goes on till pretty late in the evening. So guys stick around and still have a beer and so on. And it usually is really good fun. Pretty much every time one of these events, because it's only once a month, everyone comes out. So it's Dutch guys, German guys, people from Belgium all over. Yeah. And as you can see, the track is actually pretty big for just something they put on temporarily in a community center.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks fun. And it looks like it's nice speeds as well. It's not everyone racing away.
It depends a little bit on which kind of tires everyone decides to go with. But I think especially something like driving around within Corollas sort of asks for a kind of slower tire and slower style.
Sure. For sure.
It fits the theme. Yeah, so these guys are putting up events every month. Next one was supposed to be all about big wings.
Right.
So again, like a completely different theme.
Yeah.
If you're into that, then it's perfect. I mean, I'm not a fan, but that's just me. I know other people really are. So
I could probably win that game. I got some pretty big ones in the collection.
And wings.
Yeah. I got some of the old school ones. The giant end plates from Seoul.
Oh yeah, but also the wing deck itself. If you go for one of the old school HPI wings,
yeah,
there's something there.
I remember
too much downforce.
I was going to say, I remember the first one I bought for I made an S2000 as one of the first bodies that I did, and it was like some kind of giant scoop. It was full on buggy wing size.
That's exactly the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, it was quite ridiculous.
Works if you're doing the classic BN Sport blister body kit style.
Yeah,
because they used to have those wings on there. So
or if you're doing jumps,
something. Yeah. So yeah, this was the winner of their event. Pretty cool. So I'm looking forward to seeing some footage from the next one.
Yeah, cool. So if anyone has any other events like Tijs says, send us some pictures, send us some videos. Ideally, not on a Tuesday evening when we're just setting up, if we could have it a little bit in advance, it makes my life a lot easier. But yeah, we'd love to share info on cool events and competitions and just anything fun, really.
Yeah, exactly.
So on to our next topic.
Lightweight and
weight in general. Yeah.
Weights, yes. Yeah, so this is always an interesting one. I think putting or adding weights to your chassis, that's something we've been doing for a long time, and it's sort of a trend that comes and goes.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what this picture is from as well, like just stacking weights upon weights just to get the weight on the front. This is with the rear wheel drive. This is Michel's chassis, but even back in the CS days, we were putting soldering iron tips and crazy stuff on the front bumper just to get some grip there instead of understeering all over the place.
Yeah. And I remember there was quite a few. In fact, the Yokomo bumper had a spot for weights in, and then there was, people would make aftermarket bumpers that had weights built in that you could remove and stack them and hide them away so that they didn't look so ugly / people couldn't see them. There's a bit of a sort of throwback to the touring car days, I think.
I think a lot of the bumpers still have it, right? I mean, MST.
Yeah.
The little cutout in the foam bumper where you can put
and the weights that they sell at the perfect size and all of that. Yeah. It's not really something I've used in quite a few years, so in that sense. But it's interesting because people do everything. You've got people that are adding weights to shock towers to increase roll, adding weights to body to the body shell to increase roll. You're getting guys adding weight low down, and then you've got guys that are trying to remove as much weight as they can, and it's all very much a preference thing. But I think the strange thing is when people you see a picture like this and you're like, I'd never do that, but you didn't ever drive that chassis on that track on those tires, and that might have been the magic sauce that made that car perfect, or it might have made it horrendous. But you got to try sometimes.
Especially when we still talk about springs, basically. I mean, this combined with the heavy spring, for example, could work really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've got this old picture of you.
This was mine, yeah.
When was this?
This is a long time ago. This was 2013. We were just on the CS for the first few years. But basically, it's very hard to see in this picture, but there's a multi-tool literally taped to the roof of the
like a Leatherman.
Yeah, exactly. And this was all to get roll. That was the thing that year. I think the Yokomo drivers came to the Worlds that year with stacks of brass weights screwed into the body shell.
Yeah.
You could see like a screw head sticking out on the top. If you turn the body shell over, like stacks of weight they could add with a little nut on them.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Actually, one of the times I was at Doctor Circuit, Mori-san had I can't remember what it was. I think it was a piece of lead or something that he'd just like self-tapered through his body shell into the weight, and then but he also screwed he'd used massive extensions to screw his body into place because it was bending the posts because it was so heavy. So he actually had it permanently or firmly mounted with screws rather than clips. Richard's just pointed out in chat that MST sell front hub weights and chassis weights. They also sell rear hub weights, or used to. Yeah. I think all of those weights are probably discontinued and just left in stock with dealers. But there's lots of weights available, and I mean Topline and Mikuni and all these brands sell little screw and thumb weights and wrap up, and basically all the brands eventually have weights added. And it's one of those things where, I mean, I've done it myself. I've added them to lower arms at times. I've added them to shock towers. I've added stuff to. I used to run 2 or 3 9-volt batteries in a roof. I didn't run LEDs. I just had the batteries because they were small, predictable weights. We used to run tire balancing weights from full-size cars just stuck in. And I remember at one point, I'm sure Baggy had 450 or 500 grams in the roof of one of his bodies. I don't remember. But it's a really varied thing because so many people like adding weight and so many people hate adding weight. I haven't added weight to my chassis really in 4 or 5 years, I think. I might be forgetting times. There's times I've added screws to lower arms and things like that, just to help get the wheel to bite in, or but it's generally I've done that in competitions where time is short to tune properly, and you can just put a weight in, do a couple of laps, see if it helps. I think there is a general consensus with experienced drivers that if you're adding weight to a chassis, you're generally covering up a bad setup. But I think that's not necessarily always true. There's definitely times when you want to add weight, and I mean, there's a picture here from Shift last year, and one of the things the guys over there are doing is what's called Kashigari style, which is where you're really encouraging body roll, but it's not like a weight shift style, like the old D-like style of doing it. It's more of a more gentle style of driving. Rather than really flinging the car, you just let it roll. And it really looks cool. I mean, there's a video posted a couple of weeks ago, or maybe 3 weeks ago from Shift, that a lot of people watched, showing the Kashigari style, and that's one of these cars. This chassis is one of those, and these guys are running their chassis up to 2.8, 2.9, 3 kilos. They're running the biggest batteries they can get hold of, as high as they can mount them. You can see in that picture, it's not the greatest picture, but you can see it's I think it was an 8,000 or 8,200 milliamp hour battery with a chunk of lead underneath, with a bar underneath that mounted on extensions as high as they can get it to encourage it to roll. And then these cars also run crazy short camber links with extended rear hubs and short rear arms to encourage as much roll and camber gain as possible. So it's like, this is just a completely different, this is not what you do in a competition, this is not what you do if you're trying to be fast, this is the opposite. This is trying to slow it down and make it look cool. But this doesn't, from my experience, this doesn't really translate to carpet very well because you've got too much grip. So you have to really minimize what you're doing with this adding weight on carpet, because the carpet will load up the tire a lot easier. But it works really cool, and these look amazing, and they're really fun to drive. And this is going back to what we were just saying with the slower pace. You slow your pace down and just make the cars look cool, and you run close, and it's awesome.
Yeah, it's a completely different style, right? Like
and it's a different way of thinking.
Yeah, it's so opposite to what you normally would see, especially like the very short camber links and so on.
Yeah, and they're not, and they generally won't drive with big angle. They'll keep the angles shorter or smaller to make it easier to follow, and just to keep the cars running smoothly. And they're generally not doing crazy acceleration. They're much more gentle with the acceleration, so that it's easier to keep up if you're behind. And it's just a really nice way of driving. That for all the years I've been going to Shift, this is the thing that I've seen people most excited about, because it takes away the pressure to constantly be getting faster. And it's all about sitting, and most of these guys will sit on the floor so they can see the roll better, and they're just enjoying themselves. But then at the same track, you've got Kondo. And Kondo is a wrap-up next test driver. He's one of the most respected judges in Japan and probably the world. He's a super nice guy, and he, for the last year or 18 months, has been absolutely obsessed with weight reduction, to the point where he's gone to the extreme of replacing his screws with aluminium short screws to save some grams. He's drilling holes all over his body. He's fitting, I mean, he's even gone so far, he runs the same servo as me, the Kea Propo RSX 110 version D, but he's found one of the cheaper servos with a plastic case that uses the same shape case, and he's taken the aluminium case off his fancy servo and put the cheap case on because it saves some grams. And he got down to, I think, about 1,180 grams with a body, or 1,205. I can't remember the final number, but he got it with the body fully loaded on the chassis, on the track, at 1,200 grams ish. And that car is rapid. It's very, very, very fast. But lately, in fact, just today, he's posted a blog post to say that he's adding weight to his chassis, because the Formula Drift Shift event that we mentioned last week, so Kondo's a really good guy, but he'll take something of yours to go and weigh it without asking. He'll pick up a part and go and weigh it because he doesn't know what it weighs, and he needs to know. He's got like a database, or in his case it's a notebook that he writes down the weights of all the parts, which is awesome. But he's basically weighed everyone's chassis at the competition last weekend, and he noticed that the fastest guys were about 1,400 grams at Shift on that particular track, on that surface with those tires. So he's now adding weight to get his chassis back up to 1,400 grams to build speed, and see if his car will actually be faster.
This is the extreme scenario, right? Like this is not something you would just get off the shelf. This is really This is an expert who's enjoying learning something new and testing things to see how it works and how it functions.
Like he is absolutely as extreme as you can get with weight loss on this sort of thing. You can see he's even drilled holes in his roof. He's cut out some of the back window. I've seen him running with no wing, and he's even cut his arches so that there's less of the arch there, so you can save half a gram or a gram there. And when I gave him stickers, I was super honoured because he put a sticker on the car, because he was taking everyone else's stickers and putting them in his pit box because he didn't want the extra stickers. He was only running the bare minimum stickers he had to run, because he wanted his body to be as light as possible. And again, I can't remember what it was. I think it was 63 or 65 grams his body weighed with the wing when he painted it. And it's like, we weighed mine, which is just an overdose body with light buckets, with the standard Lexan light buckets and an overdose wing, and it was 180 something. So it's crazy how obsessed he's become. But I think it's really cool, and I think it's really good to see that you've got that, right here we've got these two completely different styles at the same track, and those guys can drive together. Admittedly, they adapt their style to drive with the other guy, because then, Kondo's always refers to his car as a racing car rather than a drift car, because he's all about speed. That's what he's interested in. Whereas these guys are going slow and enjoying it, but they can enjoy themselves drifting together because one doesn't think their way is better than the other. They're both just happy to be enjoying themselves. And I think it's awesome. It's really good to see. But one of the things I've been doing as a result of all of this is I've been paying attention to weights of products and parts, because it's just something that I'm not out to make an ultralight chassis or anything like that. I did drop the weight of my own Garm on that trip in November, because I was there for a competition, and I was driving with some of the guys that I was going to compete against at tracks before the competition, and they were faster than me, and I was struggling a bit. But when I arrived on that trip, I weighed my chassis, and it was like 1,790 grams with the body, and then by the competition I was down to like 1,520 or something, and that change in weight was enough for me to go from being a bit slow to being able to keep up. And it wasn't so extreme that like the guys were still 200-300 grams lighter than me, but I could still keep up for the most part. If they really pushed on, I'd struggle a bit, but you don't really need, it was close enough that it didn't matter in a competition, let's put it that way. But I've started weighing parts. So here you can see this is a Garm aluminium suspension mount, and it's 2.35 grams, which is, it's what it is. The plastic version is lighter, but I don't have that picture to hand. And then there's the adjustable version, and it's 4.75, and that's the version 1 adjustable version. Well, what you have to decide when you're building your car, and if you're focusing on weight, firstly, do you want the extra weight? You're trying to get more slide on carpet or something like that, so you want a slightly heavier chassis, or do you need the adjustable toe strap for the functionality it brings? For me, I need to run an adjustable toe strap on the rear, because I'm running the version 2 rear lower arm, so I can adjust my trailing angle, which means I need to be able to adjust the toe on the front toe strap to make it work and function properly. And you can see here as well, there's a plastic upper arm, and it's 5.35 grams, and then you've got a version 1 overdose upper arm, and it's getting on for double the weight. And then you've got a version 2, and it's a little bit more. Well, the version 2 upper arm gives you adjustable caster. So if you need that, if you're not running an adjustable bulkhead, then that's probably worth the extra weight.
There's quite a lot of trade-offs, of course, with these lightweight parts. I mean, the difference between aluminium and plastic is not just the material; it's the way the material behaves, but also settings, like you mentioned. Like some of the parts, they don't have the same amount of holes or the same amount of adjustability.
Yeah.
So that's one of the trade-offs. But also, there's quite a lot of flex in plastic parts usually.
Yeah.
So that will also count. I mean, your suspension will be less direct, less accurate.
Yeah. And also,
not to mention slop and
I was going to say,
parts.
If you have an all plastic front end on certain chassis, you'll have quite a lot of play. And when you put a choice selection of aluminium parts on, you get rid of most of that play. And on certain chassis, certain surfaces, that doesn't really matter, that play, because you'll drive through it. On carpet, it's less obvious. But then you go to P-tile or something, and all of a sudden you've got wheel wobble that you never had before, and you've then got to fight to remove it. So it's all just choices to make. And for me, I I quite like the challenge or the idea of the challenge of building a super light chassis just to see what I can do and see how it feels. But I'm more interested in having the functionality from the chassis that I'm running. So my chassis right now has it's not full option. In fact, I'll just grab it because it's here. I'm in the process of rewiring it. But I've taken the floating motor mount off because I've run the floating motor mount for a while and I fancy a change. So I'm now on the counter drive kit, which means I might have saved some weight. I haven't weighed those parts yet, but it's probably lighter than it was. But I'm running plastic upper arms on the front because I've got the Type 2 bulkhead on there that has the caster adjustment, so I don't need the extra adjustment there, and I can save a bit of weight. And like I say, this chassis, I don't know what it will weigh now, but I'd imagine it's probably around 1,500 grams, something like that, with the body. Whereas if you go full option, you can be over 1,800 easily.
Yeah, so for me, durability would be one of the things, because plastic parts, they strip out a little bit easier. That's usually one of the reasons why you would switch to aluminium.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, now with some aluminium lightweight parts coming out, usually is a less dense, so a softer aluminium is being used. So you run the risk of actually stripping threads in aluminium parts.
Which is always a risk, but it's a lot easier in softer aluminium, particularly if you're running something like a titanium screw or something like that. It's quite easy to do that. So it's really, it's always about finding the balance. And the most important thing with all of this that I always say to everyone is just test it. You know, if you want to run a lightweight chassis, try a lightweight chassis. It doesn't mean it's if it works well on your chassis on your track, it doesn't mean it's the be all and end all and everyone needs to do it. It means your driving style on your track currently works with that style, but you'll change. I mean, look at Kondo; he's been doing it for 18 months and now he's adding weight, and he might decide that's no good in 2 weeks and decide to go back, but it's working for him right now with the guys he's got to drive against. And for me, I think I've got 2 arms, and my plan has been for a while to have one that's just super basic and lightweight, and then one that's basically full option, because I like the full option stuff. I think it looks nicer. I like all the functionality. I like being able to show people and explain to people why certain parts work, and it's easier to do that when you can, you know, I can show them on the front bulkhead and show the adjustment that's available. It's really easy. Whereas when you're trying to describe something without being able to show somebody, it's a lot harder. So for me, in my position with work, it's definitely a benefit to have a full option car. But then when I go to a competition, when people are focusing on being lightweight, it's never been a problem until last year. When people are suddenly looking to get their cars under 1,300 grams, you've got half kilo difference, and that's really noticeable when somebody is gunning and going as fast as they can. The big thing that I noticed on that trip was it wasn't so much the corner speed or anything like that. It was just the initial acceleration onto a straight. You just, whatever you did, you couldn't keep up. The other car would leave you, and then you could catch them for the corner because you could carry more speed. But it would you'd look like you were slower than you were because you've had the delay, you've had the elastic band, you know, of falling back. Yeah, and as Bob's just said, after understanding his chassis and paying attention to performance, he tunes and fine-tunes his chassis based on feel, which I think is generally the way to go, is just try it, and if it feels good, it's probably better. I mean, Kondo is I really like using him as an example because he's at the real extreme end. I mean, he's been someone that for, I think, at least 5 years, he changes it to a new part in his chassis and he times his lap. And he does a number of laps where he's driving as hard and as fast as he can. And if it is faster, it is better. That's his opinion. So if it's not faster, that part comes off and he goes back to what he had before. And it's for me, that's not really the spirit of drifting, but it's real attention to detail that I admire and I like. The spirit of drifting to me is just put your car down and enjoy yourself. And, you know,
yeah, maybe a good disclaimer for that is also that you still should be able to drive with other people. If you're just doing it for yourself and then are not able to tandem anymore, maybe it's not so much fun. Depends on what you're looking for, of course. But I think with someone like Kondo, he's going to this extreme, but he can still slow his pace down to drive with other people.
For sure.
Fit to requirements of a specific competition. And I think that's one of the key things here to take away, I would say.
Yeah. I think he's also somebody that's been around long enough, and this is what's keeping him passionate about the hobby. It's a path to follow for a period of time to try things out and learn. Because the thing with this hobby that I think everybody probably that's been doing it a long time realizes is the thing that keeps you interested in is that it's always changing, and you can really focus on trying to make your car the fastest car or the most extreme car or whatever it is. But at some point, that's not fun anymore, because you either reach your limit or you drive with guys that aren't doing the same thing. You know, if you go to Wins and you've got the fastest competition car in the world, it's not really going to help you there. And if you take a Kashigari style car and try and enter a competition, it's not going to help you. So you need to be, for me, you need to just do what you're enjoying at the moment. And if that changes every week, then you change what you're doing every week. And if it's that you need to have two chassis, then you do what you need to do to get yourself a second chassis to play around with. I mean, that's where I'm always happiest, is when I've got two chassis, because there's always something I want to try and always want to test. The problem I always have is that when I'm traveling to, internationally and things like that, it becomes difficult to take two chassis and use two chassis, especially when you're also taking camera gear and you're doing business stuff and all that kind of thing. It ends up where the last 3 times I think I took two chassis to a track, I did like 5 laps with the second chassis, and that was it. When I built my Bianca last year and went to Cookies, I did maybe half a battery and then never used it for the rest of the trip, because I found something on the Garm that made it super awesome. So I was just enjoying driving that. But on the flip side, it's really fun to have that, because if ever you just fancy trying something crazy, I mean, like I say, my plan with my Travis that I have is I want to just make it a Kashigari style chassis and just go for the crazy roll and forget about speed and just enjoy the chassis for what it is. And I think that chassis will probably be close to 3 kilos, and I'm fine with that. Like I don't need the lightweight for it.
And even if it doesn't work out, at least you learn something.
Yeah, and
that's the whole point of it.
And I might only enjoy it for a week or a month or 6 months or whatever it is, and then be bored of it. But I've tried it, I've tested it, and that's there's so many things I've tried over the years that now they're ridiculous. I mean, we haven't even talked about wheel weights, and that was a thing that for 2 years, maybe 3 years, wheel weights. So many people ran them. Most people ran them all the time. And for one, when at one point everyone only ran them in the rear, and then everyone only ran them in the front, and it was like you were looked down upon if you did the old thing and all these crazy things. But now I haven't used wheel weights in so long, I wouldn't even imagine using them anymore. But setup has evolved, and it's got to the point where you don't really have the wheel binding issue on the front that we used to have, that they helped with.
Yeah, and also, I mean, that's the difference between rotational mass and sprung mass. So there's plenty more to play with than just having a lightweight chassis, yes or no. I mean, the balance front to rear makes a big difference. Putting weight on your arms versus putting weight on your chassis, even though it's the exact same amount, it will have a completely different feeling on the track.
Yeah, for sure.
Effect. So there's plenty to play with there, and it's cool to see though that at least some of the manufacturers are now specifically making lightweight parts, because that usually didn't happen before. You could pick something plastic or just coincidentally find something that's lighter weight than something else, but now you have a conscious choice of these parts, and then usually the trade-off is indeed settings, having the options. Because that's usually what you see now with the lightweight bits, that they have not 10 holes to choose from, but 2.
Yeah, or 4 or something. Yeah, and they also might work amazingly on one chassis or with one type of setup, but then not on another. And although those holes might be perfectly suited if you're running really fast dampers, but not so much if you're running slower dampers or something like that. So it's just one of these things. Like I say, I just think it's the best to try it out. And I think for me, if you're interested in something, you've just got to try it. Like I say, with the Reve D springs, I've just got to try them. I don't expect that they're going to be the springs I run all the time, but I'll get those, and I'll also get the new overdose springs when they come out, and I'll sell whichever ones I don't use, or I'll put them in my collection if I think they've got a use further down the line. And it's a bit of who I am, being a bit of an RC hoarder, but for me, you can kind of choose a path with your settings, and you can try things, and you can, if you're lucky enough to have 2 chassis, have one heavy chassis, one light chassis, and try them both at your local track, and then at the next track you go to. And one might be more interesting to you than the other, or you might hate one and realise you don't like a lightweight chassis, or you don't like a heavyweight chassis, and you actually just like an average weight chassis. So you just put the parts on you want and don't really worry so much about the weight. I can definitely see me being a bit obsessed about having a lightweight chassis and trying to, just as a challenge, just seeing where you can shave weight. I mean, again, as an example, Kondo's running crazy thin motor wires that get really warm because he's pushing them way beyond what they should do. But it's a risk he's willing to take, and he monitors it and tests it, and he thinks it's okay. And he runs short wires on everything and puts everything exactly where it needs to be with the shortest possible wire that he can. And he's got a crazy light chassis. But now, as I say, he's making it heavy again.
Yeah, and then besides the chassis, it's also the body, of course. I mean, I personally always put light buckets and details on the body shell.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the reasons why I like drifting, because the cars just look awesome.
Yeah.
And they have a particular style. So getting away from that, even putting stickers maybe as headlights or something.
Yeah.
Something I would never go that far. But at least it's interesting to try. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, even a normal detailed body shell is not always the same in terms of weight.
No, and actually, even just different manufacturers, there's quite a lot of weight difference.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're looking at,
multi-piece.
I was going to say, particularly if you're looking at a multiple piece body that's got its own detailed mold for each part, and then you've got the tape or whatever you've used to fix it, and then, if you're using big aluminium wing stays, then that's one thing. If you're running, an interior or an engine bay, then that's quite a different thing. And someone like Vivian, he's obviously used to running. There you go. He's just saying his D110 body was 1.9 kilos with the chassis, which isn't that much heavier than mine was at that time. Mine was probably 1750, 1800, and I didn't have any detail in my body. But he had the body. I'd imagine he had a good chunk of that weight was his body shell, whereas mine was all on the chassis. And he drove pretty good with it. He didn't do too bad at all. So maybe he could be faster with a lighter thing, but then he won a trophy and was super proud. We've got a question in chat about what's our thoughts on the YD2RR. If you mean the recently or relatively recently released chassis kit, I'm not that particularly interested in it, but in terms of a motor layout, it's kind of fine. I quite like driving some rear motor cars, but generally I prefer a mid motor with a rear ESC, or even a mid motor and a mid ESC. The rear motor thing, I've definitely enjoyed driving cars on my old RRX. I really liked, but for me now I've sort of moved on. I prefer the weight a bit further forward. But then for a competition, right now it's on carpet. It's probably the best chassis or the best position you could have the motor. But that's
for me it's the same. Like it's a very particular style they seem to go for.
Yeah.
Usually it's pretty high traction and maybe not the most stylish thing to look at least in my opinion. But indeed for competition it's pretty good. Usually they're a bit of a traction monster.
Yeah.
If the setup is right.
I was going to say that. Well, there's a follow-up question: what's the difference between rear and mid motors? And everything varies with setup and surface and tires and everything like that. But as a general rule, the rear motor will have more straight line speed, but it will probably want to hang out a bit more on the corners. And in the olden days, they tended to, I don't want to say crab more, but they were. You could see when the car was rear motor. There was particular movements it would make. Setup is a lot better now, so it's far less obvious, and there's no reason not to run a rear motor now because the setup is so much better. It's just a personal preference thing. I just prefer the weight a little bit further forward generally. I don't know about you.
Same for me. I mean mid motor has always been my preference. Actually, even I'm not that big of a fan of the high motor.
Yeah, I'm the same. I don't have a problem with people running high motor, but I'm not interested in running high motor myself. In terms of for my main chassis, for my Kashigari style Travis that I'm putting together, yeah, that's front high motor, and that's cool. But that's not where my main focus is. My main focus is on sort of mid to high speed drifting, but not sort of tire melting, and then just more control. It's all about control for me, and I like front end control. My car generally always has a very strong front end, so I don't want too much weight towards the back.
Yeah, but the difference definitely got smaller between the different layouts. I mean, before you could really tell. Now, not so much anymore.
I think setup and gyro innovations have basically changed that, and also just as a general rule with the setup, dampers are now much better tuned for rear wheel drive than they used to be. It took quite a long time for that to come, but now you see some really good movements in even high speed competition cars, which you never used to get. It just used to be about getting the tires as hot as you could and blitzing around the track quite bluntly.
Yeah, and skill level, of course, as well. I mean, it's been quite a few years now that everyone's been driving rear wheel drive. So in general, like knowledge of tuning, driving skills have also improved.
Yeah,
and people also got used to each other's driving a bit more, I think, because competitions now are mainly rear wheel drive. Most events you will only see rear wheel drive cars. Yeah, I think everyone got used to it a bit more and sort of aligned a little.
Yeah, and like I say, just to repeat it again, there's nothing wrong with doing anything any particular way. I think the thing when you've been doing it as long as we have, you kind of get stuck in your ways, or it's easy to get you stuck in your ways a little bit. And so I think last year I was planning on building or converting my RMX2 to an RRX just to try out the rear motor thing again, because it was a cheap conversion kit. I never ended up getting around to it because I was a bit busy in the end and had other plans, but at some point I probably will, just to try it out again, because it's been, I don't know, the version 1 RX VIP probably came out in 2015, I would think.
14 or 15.
Yeah,
probably,
late 14 or early 15, and so that's the last time I personally ran a rear motor, and I ran that chassis for quite a while, and it was my favourite chassis for a while. And in fact, I think I ran that until Garm came out. I know I ran the Z-Cross first, but yeah. So I ran it for a considerable amount of time anyway, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then last year, I think it was, I drove Brian Sebastian's, and he was running the old style RRX again, and it was really fun. And it was way better than it was the first time he ran it, because he'd evolved in his tuning knowledge and setup. So yeah, I think it's definitely worth playing around with. But I don't know. I don't know if the person who asked that question has also ran a YD2 without the rear motor conversion on, but it's one of those things. It'll work certain places and certain tracks, but sometimes it's good to just go back to normal and try it out for sure, and especially after a period of time, because you might find that your car is now set up better and it behaves better with the mid motor.
All right, I think that's a good moment to wrap it up.
Yeah, for sure.
This episode, right?
Yeah.
What's coming up? What can we expect next time? What are you doing? Busy with?
Well, at the moment, to be perfectly honest, I'm mostly working on video stuff for this channel. But so I'm working on a video at the moment for just showing how to update a 7PX and 7PXR. I'm also working on an update for the video that I've almost finished about the Jarvis XX. I'm just waiting for some information from AccuVance to make sure that I'm accurate with one or two things in that. And then I'm also hopefully going to finish my Garm, put it back together, because I nearly did it the other day and then I changed my mind on some layout stuff, so I've got to do a load of stuff again, which is inevitable. Oh, and I've also started another body. I say started. Hey. I'll be going cutting out a body, just a basic Pandora Origin Lab S15. That's going to be very simple. I just fancied a change and fancied something for my high motor. Travis.
Is it the new one with the wide front end?
Or... No, it's the previous one from.
The old one, yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit more normal shaped, if it's the only way I can say it. The other one's a bit extreme for my liking, but it's just one. It's one I had in the garage, and I fancied. I need to do some practice airbrushing. I've got a load of airbrush paints now, so I need to test on some bodies that don't really matter. I don't want to do it on. I've messed up my first attempt at airbrushing, so I need to get a few under my belt. So I'm just going to paint it, use it for a very short time, and then get it shifted and paint another one, I think. That's my plan. What about you?
I signed up for the first round of D110 in the Netherlands, so that's going to happen this Sunday, I believe.
And where's
Sunday.
that?
It's going to be at Michel's track, so at the Tory Circuit.
Cool.
So I think it's the first round of the season, and it's also going to be the last one that Michel and Owen, they're stopping the D110. So that's going to be handed over to Arno. So yeah, it's the first round, but whenever the second round is going to be or how the setup is going to be, that's all up in the air.
It's the first round and maybe a bit of a finale as well.
Yeah, maybe. Let's see how it goes. I mean, the plans are 10, and I
think you might need to repeat that. The plans are
to at least continue with D110.
Cool.
But with a bit of a refresh and a bit of a change. So yeah, let's see what the future will bring.
That'd be good. And then I think the other thing I was going to do is I need to sign up for the UKDC that we talked about. I haven't done it yet. There's not too many people who've signed up, so any of the UK guys that are planning on doing it, maybe you should get signed up now, because they definitely need some support, I think.
Sounds like a good competition, so
yeah,
I would say go for it. It's been a long time coming that there's a competition.
Yeah, for sure. I think
don't sleep on it.
Nah, and I think even if we have to give it a try and see how it works out for sure.
Yeah, at least compete in the first round, right? If you don't like it, you can always.
Yes, I'm hoping to make the first round. Currently, the dates are not possible for me, but I'm trying to reshift things so I can make the first one, which is the reason I haven't booked in yet, because I'm planning to just book in for all of them, but I'm obviously not sure I can do the first one yet. But cool. Well,
all right.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. And as always, if you've got any questions or anything like that, fire us a message. And you might even give us something to talk about next week, because we'll be back next Tuesday at 7 UK time, 8 Central European time.
Yes.
And
right.
Yeah. And tell us about your events. And also
send us stuff, send us pictures, send us videos.
Send me pictures of your Pace merchandise. It makes me smile every time.
Exactly.
I appreciate all the sales.
Yeah, so thanks for watching, everyone, and see you next week.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.